Hi Blood Bowl fans, King Ghidra here, and welcome to today's video in which we are going to be taking a look into our crystal ball, not to watch some Cabal Vision HD, but to try and predict the future of the Blood Bowl tournament meta in 2021. Now obviously with Blood Bowl's second season being released, we've had a lot of changes to a number of the game's core rule systems, the rosters, the skills, and a number of other things that are definitely going to cause some kind of shake-up of the Blood Bowl tournament meta. What is that going to be? Well, sit back and relax, and I'm going to break it down for you. So if we want to understand how the meta is going to change, obviously first of all we need to understand what the meta looks like now. And if you look at the data that I've put up on the screen here, this is something like 185,000 games worth of NAF tournament data from 2017 to 2019. So that's 3 full years of tournament data covering the BB 2016 rule set. And what you can see here, we've got the number of games played at tournaments, the number of tournament wins, and then we've got the win percentage across all games played in NAF tournaments as well. And the message is pretty clear. We're all living in a wood elf wonderland. They are the most popular team, they are the most successful team, and they have the best winning percentage just generally in any given game. I think you can see there's a few other suspects that have similar win rates, popularity, and tournament success as well. Certainly Undead are up there. Lizardmen to a large extent, though slightly less popular. Dark Elves, and well, you can see for yourself who the main players are. There are some teams that have kind of anomalies in certain area. For example, if you look at Amazons, extremely high win rate, good tournament success, but they don't even feature on the representation column at all. In fact, they are a notable overperformer in terms of success versus their representation, which won't be a surprise to anyone. They are definitely one of the elite top tier teams in the game. Also things like orcs and dwarves, popular teams don't tend to rack up so much success. I think this is probably mainly because slower teams just don't get enough wins to win tournaments. This is something you'll see with a number of bashers that don't have movement abilities in tournament Blood Bowl. They don't get beaten a lot, they can get good win rates, but they probably don't win quite enough games to just take home as many tournaments as some other teams. Also orcs and humans particularly, as you can see from the tourney representation there, humans very popular team, as with orcs, because of course they come in the box. Every Blood Bowl player has probably got those teams, and so they have very high representation, but they're not necessarily always taken by the most elite metagaming players on the scene. So that's the tournament meta as it looks now, and these are the guys whose positions are under threat by changes in the new edition. And let's have a look at how BB second season edition is going to shake this up. So what are the reasons that the tournament meta is going to change as a result of Blood Bowl second season edition? The most important one is we've had an overhaul of all the rules and skills and their behaviours in the game. We've had a change to passing, particularly with the addition of the passing stat. And this is going to have a huge impact on a number of teams, and maybe just general play to a certain extent in terms of what kind of strategies and tactics work on a game by game basis. So that's obviously going to be a massive factor. The other one is roster changes. So we've seen positional costs increase for the vast majority of teams. We've seen some stat and skill changes for some of those rosters, and we've seen new options on some of those rosters. So for example, Chaos Chosen can now take ogres and trolls, as well as the traditional Minotaur. So all of those things are clearly going to have a potential impact on the meta. So let's start with a big one. We've established that the meta right now is dominated by Wood Elves, and Wood Elves have had, in my opinion at least, one of the biggest nerfs in Blood Bowl 2nd Season Edition, and it's effectively a three-pronged nerf. The first one is in the change to the passing stat. The fact that only Wood Elf throwers now are really consistent good throwers is a significant impact to a typical element of Wood Elf gameplay, which was that any member of the team could pick the ball up if it was on the floor or in just general open play and sling it around with great confidence, and that has now been impacted very, very significantly. And I perceive that to be quite a core part of Wood Elf gameplay, and it's going to mean a bit of a rethink for Wood Elves in a number of situations where they would naturally have been able to pass the ball. Now that's not completely crippling for Wood Elves, because Wood Elves are also one of the best running teams in the game, have fantastically high movement allowance, and obviously they still retain their great agility, and that means that they can still escape difficult situations and be generally mobile around the pitch. But certainly there are particular key situations where it was often very, very valuable for Wood Elves to be able to pick the ball up and move it very quickly with passing, and it's very likely that that's going to be quite heavily impacted in Blood Bowl 2nd Season Edition. And one of those situations where that was often the case was after stripping the ball or knocking the ball free after a cage leap. And with the changes to leaping in Blood Bowl 2nd Season Edition, which has been made slightly harder in the more difficult leaps, and the most difficult of those is leaping into a cage. And again, this was another pillar of Wood Elf gameplay, and I think the fact that this has again been made more difficult is again a big nerf to Wood Elves. It certainly doesn't prevent them leaping and taking advantage of that skill and being able to unlock the ball free in a number of other different situations, but in a situation which was really a fundamental often seen element of any given Blood Bowl game involving Wood Elves, it's definitely taken a hit and will require again some rethinking from Wood Elf players. The final one is they took a explicit hit on having sprint skill removed from their catchers. Now that is a straight up nerf to their ability to be able to score one turn touchdowns, and this was unquestionably another aspect of Wood Elf gameplay that made them so good at winning games and scoring touchdowns. And you know, this really puts a kink in Wood Elf's general ability to basically cause bullshit across the board. I think, you know, if you take all of those three things together, then the ability of Wood Elves to get touchdowns from seemingly out of nowhere has really taken quite a big hit, I think, and unquestionably that will mean that they win less games. My opinion at least is they've really been knocked down quite a level by all of this stuff combined, and I don't particularly see a reason why they're much better than any of the other Elves teams. For example, Elven Union in this edition right now. How far they fall, we'll see. You know, if it's 2, 3, 4 percentage points, then as per the chart that we put up earlier, that really puts them down in the pack as, you know, a good team but not the very best team in the game. But time will tell. So if Wood Elves are falling, then who is on the rise? Well, the prime candidate would probably be let's imagine a team that has just got fantastic win rates across the board and has got one particular bad matchup, and that matchup happens to be Wood Elves. Well, that isn't an imaginary team, that's a real team, and that team is Lizardmen. And as we saw from the stats earlier, Lizardmen already one of the very, very best teams in the game, and their matchup against Wood Elves was absolutely diabolically bad for them. So if Wood Elves do take any kind of hit, as I expect they do, then absolutely directly buffs Lizardmen, and in my opinion propels Lizardmen to the top of the tree as our probable meta dominant race in Blood Bowl second season edition. And Lizardmen didn't really get any nerfs. In fact, you might argue that they got a little bit of a buff because chameleon skinks are probably better and more useful than they have ever been. They got given a 3+ passing stat, which puts them on par with a lot of other half decent passers in the world of Blood Bowl second season edition. And they got the on the ball skill, which is a nice combination of pass block and kickoff return. So they whether they're worth their slightly increased cost over regular skinks, you can probably still debate, but they're definitely pretty good now, I would say. And certainly in terms of other changes, the only one that you could probably say has hurt lizards is the break tackle skill change. A lot of people did like to use break tackle to create mobility on lizards, and that's just not really going to be viable anymore. But I think going the block route, which was always a kind of alternate primary build for lizards, is just as viable, and so I don't think that that really hurts them overall, though you will almost certainly find players who liked the break tackle playstyle and think that it does, but I don't think it's going to hurt them overall. I don't think they've suffered, and I think they are absolutely poised to be the very best team in this meta. Now we also have two other teams that are among the very best in the current meta who have taken substantially no nerfs or negative changes whatsoever, and those are Amazons and Dark Elves. And to my mind, they round out the top three with Lizards as our likely meta dominant races in 2021. As I say, they did not receive any increases to their positional values. They did not receive any real nerfs to their stats and skills. Obviously, they, like every other team in the game, has been impacted by the passing ability change, but they are both two running teams rather than passing teams, so I don't think that's a big problem for them at all. And yeah, generally with no costing increases, no other particular changes, and no real other effects of the rule and skill updates in this edition seeming to impact them in any way, I think Dark Elves and Amazons are going to be extremely strong in this edition. Now, one of our other major players in the current meta are Undead, and again, Undead have for the most part not really taken any nerfs, with one possible exception, and that is the passing ability change is not particularly kind to Undead in terms of its impact on the ghouls' ability to be emergency throwers in making those 2-turn, 3-turn scores that are often very significant in turning draws into wins. I think that's a slight knock on them. Again, they're still a fantastic team in all other respects. A bashy hybrid team that is one of the best bashers, has great mobility with the ghouls, but I do think you'll probably find that they get stuck drawing a few games that they were otherwise able to win because they're not able to make those kinds of clutch passes that they used to be able to make. It's only a slight knock. I don't think it substantially changes them as one of the very best teams in the game. They didn't really take any other hits, so I think they are going to be right up there. But we may see them fall back ever so slightly, I think. So to move away from talking about teams for a moment, one of the big changes which many people think is going to have an impact on Blood Bowl meta in all formats actually is the change to Sneaky Git. Now Sneaky Git used to be one of the worst skills in the game, and with its update in Blood Bowl 2nd Season Edition, it's had a significant boost. Firstly, in terms of its primary role, which means it reduces the chance of you being sent off. In fact, if you have Sneaky Git, you are reduced to a mere 1 out of 6 chance to be sent off, assuming you break armor. If you don't break armor, you're not going to be sent off at all. And the secondary element of it is that you can move after the foul. Now, those are both excellent things, and a lot of people believe that they are going to lead to more fouling with Sneaky Git players and better positional situations as a result of fouling, not least maybe being able to get a fouler out of trouble and back to safety after committing the foul. The other very interesting thing about this, assuming it does turn out to be a thing, is that of course Sneaky Git is an agility skill. So the teams and players to whom it is available on normals, and this is almost certainly a very big deal in terms of the tournament meta, where normal skills are far more common and secondary skills are very much at a premium, it's going to be available to those teams that naturally have agility access on normals, and as coincidence would have it, those top 3 teams, Lizardmen, Amazons and Dark Elves, all have agility access on normals or primary skills. So if it does turn out to be a thing, then those 3 teams, which are already probably going to be the best in the game, are certainly going to be able to take advantage of it. And many of the other teams that are popular in the meta are not so easily going to be able to take advantage of it. So I'll talk about a couple of the other teams on our popular and successful list from the old meta, and the thing that both these teams share in common is that they're both commonly part of tier 2 in tournament packs in the old meta, and those are humans and necromantic. Necromantic in particular became very, very popular as a tier 2 team because with most tournaments giving a fairly generous selection of skills and doubles in the tier 2 skill packs, Necro proved to be a very, very effective team with that little additional boost. And assuming that they continue as a tier 2 tournament classified team going into this edition, I think it's very likely that we'll see them continue to be a very successful side. In terms of their changes in this edition, the far and away the most significant one, of course, is the change from whites to wraiths. And I think general universal agreement that the wraith is a really good and interesting positional. There are lots of different ways to build it. It can be just a hitter, or it can be a kind of an annoyance piece with its sidestep and foul appearance. So I think for general play, general agreement that wraiths will be a really interesting and good addition for Necro. Now the downside, of course, is the no hands thing. So what that means is that Necro have lost 2 potential ball carriers. Now Probably whites weren't doing a lot of that work for Necros, but as we all know in Blood Bowl, when plans go awry, we often need to, go to our plan B and our plan C, and I think probably quite often whites turned out to form part of that for Necro, and that obviously won't be an option anymore. And again, like Undead, they've also suffered from passing ability change, which has meant less ability to pass for the ghouls and obviously no ability to pass for the zombies and the flesh golems as well, actually. So I do think Necro have had a little bit of a buff with the wraiths, but they also have probably taken a bit of a knock in the ball handling stakes and maybe a little bit of reliability in terms of doing those 2-turn, 3-turn touchdowns, which are often needed to win games of Blood Bowl. So I would say overall I think they're still going to be very good, strong, as long as tournament organisers continue to put them into Tier 2. As for humans, they carved out quite a good niche for themselves as one of the teams best able to use star players, and with things like Zerg plus Ogre plus their very effective blitzers, they're actually able to become quite a bashy hybrid team. Also Karla was a very valid option for them, and they had some other potential options with star players as well. They had quite a few different builds that they could work with. And again, in Blood Bowl second season edition, the price of a number of those star players has come down, so I think we'll continue to see a strong set of human teams using different builds involving those star players. And another aspect for them that people are excited about is the potential use of catchers as the aforementioned sneaky git foulers, and again, if that does turn out to be a powerful tactic, then humans will definitely be one of those teams able to take advantage of it. So I do think we'll see humans continue to be quite a strong force in the meta in 2021. So mentioned in the introduction, when talking about some of the popular teams that didn't have huge success or win rate, Dwarves have a particular issue if the meta does change as we predict in 2021, and that is, much as Lizardmen were very much kept in check by Wood Elves, Dwarves are very much kept in check by Lizardmen. So if we do see more lizards or a lizard dominated meta in 21, this is very much a bad thing for Dwarves. And ditto for Orcs, for whom Lizardmen are one of the very worst matchups they have. So both of these two teams, which are already struggling a little bit in any tournament metas where they need to get wins, and it's worth mentioning that in team Blood Bowl tournaments, those two teams will probably still continue to be strong just because they don't lose very much, and it's a slightly different meta in those circumstances. But for tournaments as we generally approach them, both Orcs and Dwarves I think are going to have a bit of a problem in this meta. So again, stepping away from talking about teams to talk about star players for a bit, because lots of changes to star players in this edition, the most significant one being that all star players are now getting a special rule. Some of them appear to be really good, some of them are just kind of okay, but obviously as we get more stars released with the new Spike magazines, as they're all updated, and I'm assuming that a lot of the old new stars that came out in the spikes through BB 2016 are going to return with updated stats and updated prices and new special rules, that there's going to be a lot of potential for particular combinations of stars at particular price points with particular good special rules to make an impact on the meta. Now, in terms of what we've got now out of the rulebook, there is a particularly large elephant in the room when it comes to stars who are probably going to have a meta impact, and that elephant is Hack Flem Scuttlespike, who is effectively a super gutter runner and is available to all Chaos teams, not just Skaven, not just Underworld, but to all Chaos teams right now. If you look at the way a number of people were building rosters in the BB 2016 meta, using Ludegrip Whiparm as a primary ball carrier for Chaos became a very popular thing to do. You have a relatively cheap player, good movement, some key skills which Chaos didn't really want to waste in terms of ball handling, things like sure hands, and it just worked out to be a really good fit. Well, I would say that Hakflem is a million times better than Ludegrip. It's ridiculous that you could have a gutter runner available to teams that just aren't supposed to have those kinds of players available to them. And another thing that it makes me think of is things like Roxyzons in BB 2016. So again, you have a team in Amazons that was a super top tier team, and probably had one main limitation, which is that it's fairly slow, not great agility, and not particularly capable of making those kinds of field stretching or game changing splash plays. They were just kind of generally good and capable of winning by being better throughout a game. But adding Roxana Dark now to the mix changed everything for Amazons, and it gave them a capacity which you would assume that they were simply not supposed to possess. I think Hakflem is likely to do the same for the various Chaos teams. Now, admittedly, those teams are generally in tier 2 and are, again, as kind of slower bashers, not particularly great at winning games, but maybe that will change with Hakflem. I don't know. He's only 180,000 gold, which is ridiculously cheap. He has loads of great skills, and to my mind, he's going to be an auto take in any rule set that permits it. So there are a bunch of other good stars available right now, and virtually all stars came down in price to some degree or another. Certainly some of the most expensive ones did. We also have a huge change in terms of star player eligibility. So we now have more stars available to more teams than ever before, because we've lost that kind of granularity of availability, and we now have the keyword system. So we now have crazy stuff like Deeproot could play for a human team, for example. And Deeproot came down in price as well, so maybe that's something that we'll see. I don't know. I think a lot of these things, again, are going to depend on particular rule packs. They're going to depend on the kind of team value that tournaments run at, and then they're also going to depend on those star player special rules and just the particular kind of creative builds that the community comes up with. But I have absolutely no doubt that it's going to play a big part in shaking up the meta for those teams that are able to take advantage of it. Whether it will change the very top of the meta, I don't think so based on what I know now, but will it empower a lot of teams further down in the win rates? Yes, I think it probably will, and it may well be that there's some kind of really terrifying and broken combo out there. Again, we'll wait for the community to expose it if such a thing exists. So there's one other team that I want to talk about that I think are going to play a big part in shaking up the meta in 2021, and that is Underworld. Now, towards the back end of the BB 2016 meta, Underworld emerged as one of the most interesting and powerful teams, and that was primarily as a result of having access to a couple of very good stars, Skitter, who again was a kind of super gutter runner, and Glart, or both the Glarts as it were, given that they were both available at the end of the last edition, who were effectively claw blitzers, or strength 4 claw blitzers. Now, obviously, some things have changed a little bit. We've only got one Glart now. We don't have Skitter, although we do have Hackflem. But Underworld received a number of other very, very interesting changes to their roster. Most notably that they can now take a Rat Ogre as well as the Troll as their big guy, or instead of the Troll, I should say. Also, of course, they had a shake-up to their actual roster itself as a result of the spike that they were included in. So we no longer have the old 2 thrower, 2 blitzer, and a bunch of linemen roster that we knew. We now have the gutter runner, thrower, blitzer, lineman roster instead. Now, the other addition they got in the new edition was that they can now have snotlings on the team, and that means the swarming rule, which means they can potentially have more than 11 players on the pitch. Now, all of this adds up to the fact that there are lots of different ways of building Underworld, and they're very cheap, and that means you can have lots of players. You can have extra players as a result of snotling. You're very likely to be able to start with 12 to 14 players on the field. You're very likely to be able to play a good fouling game, and again, sneaky git, if that's a thing. Underworld are really able to take advantage of it. You have fantastic range with your gutter runner, and perhaps being able to induce Hackflem. You have great hitting power. The Rat Ogre is probably better for an aggressive play style than the Troll was. So I think there is a world of possibility and potential for Underworld as a tournament meta shaking up team. There are so many different ways that they can be built, and ultimately their one negative is they still have to carry a lot of stunty players, and if they are bringing a bunch of goblins and snotlings onto the field, then there's high potential for them to be vaporized by teams that are able to take advantage of that. But for teams that struggle with dodgers, or for teams that the Underworld is simply able to get into first and do some damage, do some clawing, do some fouling, they can very quickly find themselves with a numbers advantage, a positional advantage, and really able to control the game and bash other teams into submission, whilst having incredible mobility with the ball and off the ball. So I think Underworld are really, really interesting. I suspect they're going to be one of the better teams in the BB21 meta. Whether they prove to be popular, I don't know. I don't think they've ever been a particularly popular team because they've always been a bit fiddly to buy models for, and probably don't appeal to a lot of people in the same way that some of the big teams do. But I think they're going to have a really good win rate, and they do have potential to be one of the best teams in this meta. Now, I'm not going to talk about every team because it would take an extremely long time, and I think there are a number of teams that haven't actually been powerfully affected by the changes to the game or by changes to their particular rosters. But what I will leave you with here is a tier list, so that everyone can have a good argument and can just lay out and have a look at the overall picture of what I think the Blood Bowl meta for tournaments is going to look like in 2021. So that's my take, my predictions about some of the things that we're going to see in the 2021 meta in Tournament Blood Bowl. Please let me know your thoughts and your comments, and hopefully very soon we'll all get a chance to meet on the field and thrash these things out amongst one another. So thanks for watching, and see you on the field.